Have you ever wondered what an acid or shroom trip would be like? Have you been told that you would have acid flashbacks for the rest of your life if you partake of the psychedelic universe? Throughout the last few years, I have found myself enthralled with the world of psychedelics and their ins and outs. I've watched documentaries, read books, and even talked with multiple people that have tripped. Even though the government and the media have wrongly demonized psychedelics, they are proven to have positive effects on terminally ill patients in controlled settings. As new medical research is being discovered, it is essential to understand what is going on and how it can help those that we love. Today I'm going to give you an increased knowledge of the world of psychedelics, more specifically LSD, and the benefits that are being discovered when they are taken in controlled settings. Psychedelics are potent hallucinogenic substances that provide users with an expanded and virtual sense of reality. These substances can occur naturally or by manipulation in labs. Quote, psychedelics have been used since ancient times by various cultures throughout the world for their mystical and spiritual associations. End quote. However, psychedelics hit their peak in modern culture within the United States during the hippie movement of the 60s and 70s. The two forms of psychedelics currently used most often are lysergic acid diethylamide, also known as LSD or acid, and psilocybin, which is found in magic mushrooms. Quote, LSD is made from a substance found in ergot, which is a fungus that infects rye, whereas psilocybin is a naturally occurring substance found in mushrooms and is found in many parts of the world, end quote. Unfortunately, with the psychedelic overload of the Summer of Love in the 60s and the subsequent war on drugs, a large percentage of the population holds many hindrances and fallacies towards psychedelics. After the Summer of Love, the government decided to make psychedelics illegal and put out anti-psychedelic propaganda. Lots of harmful misconceptions surfaced because of this propaganda. One of the more common rumors about psychedelics is that it's a very, very harmful drug, but, quote, compared to legal drugs like alcohol and tobacco, LSD is a blip in the radar and actually one of the least harmful common drugs, end quote. According to the chart published by the Independent Scientific Committee on Drugs, psychedelics rank at about a 7, whereas alcohol ranks at 72. However, the Drug Enforcement Administration still keeps LSD classified as a Schedule I drug, labeling it as one of the, quote, most dangerous drugs, end quote, with, quote, no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse, end quote. A growing body of scientific research, however, may ultimately prove that this blanket prohibition on LSD is based on another set of lies. The most common misconception is that you will have acid flashbacks if you do LSD. Quote, the kind of flashbacks popularized by drug war panic don't actually happen, and those that do are usually brief and mild. A small minority of users, however, may experience hallucinogenic persisting perception disorder, which manifests itself in audiovisual and sensory distortions like flashing colors, visual illusions, and visions of fractals and other trippy phenomenon long after the LSD has left the body, end quote. Psychiatrist Henry David Abraham told Popular Science in 2013 that persisting ongoing effects from HPPD are rare, and that in 1 in 20 at most would potentially be affected. Quote, in 2002, psychiatrist John Halpern concluded previous studies on the condition hadn't properly established whether the reported symptoms could be linked to factors like other drug use or neurological and psychological disorders, end quote. With all the new studies surfacing about LSD and its potential medical uses, some of these misconceptions are finally being exposed as the myths they are. At this point, you're probably wondering what a psychedelic trip entails and the positive and negative effects of one. A typical trip lasts between 6 and 11 hours, depending upon factors like dosage and body mass, with a 3 to 6 hour plateau. However, the effects of LSD are numerous and entirely dependent on your set, your personality, goals, desires, mental state, etc., and setting, your environment, time of day, people you're surrounded by, etc. According to a chart by E.S. Fein, positive effects include sensory enhancement and overall feeling of connectedness to the universe, life-changing spiritual experiences, etc. Neutral effects include pupil dilation, increased body temperature, and a change in the perception of time. Potential adverse effects include increased paranoia, nausea, oversensitivity to noise, and the aforementioned minimal possibility of acid flashbacks. Most of the possible adverse effects of psychedelics come with a bad trip. However, a good trip is almost guaranteed within a controlled set and setting. Recently, psychedelics have been used in therapeutic studies within controlled environments to help terminally ill patients cope with death and their mortality. Anthony Bossis, a researcher at New York University, shared that his research on cancer patients showed that quote, psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy facilitated improvements in psychiatric and existential distress, quality of life, and spiritual well-being, end quote. Even as long as 4.5 years after the first doses, quote, approximately 60 to 80% of participants met criteria for clinically significant antidepressant and anti-anxiety responses. Participants overwhelmingly, 71 to 100%, attributed positive life changes to the psilocybin-assisted therapy experiences and rated it among the most personally meaningful and spiritually significant experiences of their lives. End quote. With this study, it is suggested that psilocybin treatment holds a promise that cancer patients could find long-term relief from psychological distress brought on by cancer. Researchers Ekman and Gabrielle Agin-Liebes also conducted a similar therapeutic psychedelic study on long-term HIV and AIDS survivors. Also, they noticed an improvement in quality of life and reduction of existential distress and depression. A single psilocybin session also helped most participants let go of rigid negative thought patterns. In other words, it gave them a break from the relentless barrage of self-criticism and judgment, and it increased openness to their emotions. For a lot of the study's participants, they were able to take the small experiences and apply them to their everyday lives, allowing them to be more present and, quote, break free of their habitual tendencies to become entangled with the stressful patterns and negativity, end quote. So not only does psychedelic therapy help these patients come to terms with their mortality, but it also allows them to apply helpful mindsets to their everyday existence. With the increase of research being done about psychedelics and their beneficial properties, especially with terminally ill patients, some of the barriers put up by the lives of previous generations are being broken down, and people can use these mind-altering substances for good. However, please note that psychedelics are still illegal in the United States and that I'm not saying you should self-medicate with illicit substances.